From the Delhi studios of Republic TV, it's time for the debate.
Several people asking around the world on what really is the truth about a pandemic that has overtaken your life and my life. The question Republic TV is going to be asking today is, let's unravel the China COVID truth. The scientific community has been trying to unearth the truth. There needs to be another investigation, and we need to come to know, isn't it time to tie up the loose ends and to unravel, like I said, the China COVID truth? That's what we're going to be debating at 9 p.m. today. Let's also tell you, followed by the 9 p.m. debate when Republic TV is going to unravel the China COVID truth and we try and see the true picture as global pressure mounts on China. We're also going to show at 10 p.m. the effects of a pandemic across India. 10 p.m. India fights COVID. We show you ground reports in India's COVID fight, reports on India's COVID fight back. Let's now take a look at our top headlines. Indian government stresses on the need for second round of probe to get answers on the COVID origin. S. Gurumurthy cites global reports to put spotlight on alleged link between Wuhan lab and the PLA. US President confirmed US intel reports on virus origin will be made public in 90 days. As India witnessed steady decline in cases, Delhi Chief Minister announces gradual unlock process from Monday. Mamta skips the Prime Minister's cyclone review meeting. Bengal Chief Minister says she submitted a report to PM. The BJP calls it arrogance. The NCB arrests Siddharth Patani, flatmate of Sushant Singh Rajput. He was arrested 2 days ago in Hyderabad. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to unravel the COVID China truth. For the last few weeks, there has been a global demand with pressure growing to really investigate, unearth and understand what happened 2 years ago in China and what led to the virus. As the demand around the world grows, the only question that India is also saying is it's time for a fair investigation. Who should be heading the investigation? What will the narrative from now be? That's what we're going to be looking at. Here's a report and then we debate.
The President of United States of America has confirmed that in the next 90 days, he would make the US Intelligence Department's COVID origin probe report public. With this move, the Biden administration has for the first time taken an open position on COVID origin investigation, something that even India is now supporting openly. With the global pressure mounting on China, the focus is now firmly on Wuhan Institute of Virology. Many experts believe that the lab leak theory cannot be ruled out. One person who has researched and written extensively on this is science journalist Nicholas Wade.
Chinese are going to resist it until sufficient pressure is put on them to cooperate with us and show us scientifically what happened. And I think the way to exert that pressure is, as I just said, for scientists in every country in India and Europe and the US, all should either come together.
And Tughlaq editor S. Gurumurthy has strongly taken forward Nicholas Wade's views in his 2 published articles. He has cited various global reports to say that Wuhan Institute of Virology could have been mixed up with heinous work, probably in collaboration with Chinese military. As global momentum grows on a more detailed second Wuhan investigation, all eyes are now on China. Will the Chinese government cooperate, or will the world once again get an inconclusive report on the virus that first emerged in Wuhan? Let's debate.
Let me first welcome on our debate, as we have with us people from across India, people from across the world, to understand what's happening with the China COVID truth. Tenzin Sunde, Tibetan writer and activist, joining us live from Delhi. Professor Madhav Nanapat, strategic analyst, live from Delhi. Also with us, Andrew K.P. Leung, international and independent China strategist, live from Hong Kong with us. James Kraska, JSSJD chairman, and Charles H. Stockton, professor of international maritime law, US Naval War College, joining us live from the United States. Professor Shrikant Kondepalli, writer and professor of Chinese studies at JNU, live from Delhi with us. Dr. Amitesh Anand, infectious disease expert, University of California, live from San Diego. And Ray Locker, author and presidential historian, live from Washington, D.C. I welcome all of you on the show, and as I thank all of you for being with us, the truth of the matter today is, and I begin with Ray here. Very good evening, Ray. As I welcome you, I ask you, it's time to unravel the China COVID truth. Joe Biden has clearly said that it's time to have an investigation. Do you think the investigation has to be by the WHO that has already come out with a prima facie finding, which seems to be giving a sort of clean chit to China? Whereas the MEA today calls for robust conclusions, Joe Biden has also commissioned a report from the US intelligence calling on China to cooperate also, aiming to release that report in a 90-day period. So Ray, global pressure building on China, what do you think should be the way ahead, as Joe Biden has also now commissioned this report?
I think you got to take all the U.S. intelligence agencies that have a piece of this puzzle. That includes, CIA, National Security Agency, the Pentagon, which studies these diseases to a great extent, and put it all together, get information from the WHO as best as they can do it, and see what the Chinese do. I mean, one of the reasons why this theory has taken on for as long as it has, China has never been transparent on this. And we should have expected that. I mean, we always know that the Chinese never really come forward with all this information when it's the right time. So this is basically a part of their lack of transparency. That's why they're suspicious about it. But it's not conclusive that this thing came from a lab. Most people believe it still came from wild animals, food markets in Wuhan in that area. But, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and I hope that this study can find the answers.
Yes, I hope so too. I hope a study finds the answers, but what about the stuff that we already have with us? And for that, I want to go across to Andrew K.P. Leung, international and independent China strategist, who's also with us. Andrew, we already have a lot of details with us. A very famous writer, Tughlaq editor, Gurumurthy, has today questioned the meekness of WHO when he says that Nicholas Wade had spoken in great detail about who had obligingly implied the natural evolution theory in naming the virus. Also, the composition of WHO commission to probe whether it was a natural evolution or a man-made virus was heavily controlled by Chinese authorities. Isn't it clear a fresh independent probe is much the need of the hour?
Well, I think that first of all, we shouldn't base our judgment on conjecture. I think that it requires scientific evidence. And up to now, there is no scientific evidence that this virus could have escaped from a lab. But on the other hand, this possibility cannot be ruled out. And that's included in the WHO report. But then the report also said that the likelihood of it escaping from the lab is most unlikely, whereas the virus could have migrated from the bats is the more likely scenario, because the scientists found actual virus, this COVID-19 virus, in the bats. But what is inconclusive is the migration from the bats to humans. So I think there is still a lot of some uncertainty in the findings. And as far as China is concerned, I think China openly said that they welcome investigations looking into the real origin of the virus, because in fact, before the virus happened in late 2019, later on it was discovered that traces of the virus were found in certain parts in Europe. And as far as the lab leak possibility is concerned, in fact, in 2019, before the happening of this pandemic in China, there was a similar army lab in the United States called Fort Detrick, D-I-E-T-R-I-C-K, in Maryland, which was closed because of some sort of accident. And then after its closure, as many as 10,000 people were affected with a strange kind of flu-like fever. So again, if you believe in this lab leak theory, from China's perspective, then similarly there should be an investigation in the United States and in other areas as far as the traces of the virus is concerned. So I think at the moment there's still a great deal of finger-pointing, demonization based on conjecture, which is of course very helpful and not very helpful. Now, as far as President Biden is concerned, what he has said is he wants to look at the bottom of this because the a report from his staff is not conclusive. I mean, everybody knows this, but I think that there is also a bit of China demonization as well. So I think that as I said, China in fact supports an international investigation into the origin, but not just on China, but on other countries as well.
Yes, I believe that. And I also need to then now, I understand that particular way of getting through, but I also want to know more about the origins. There are a lot of theories which we are going to go through in this debate. I also want to welcome on the show Sardar R.P. Singh, national spokesperson for the BJP. R.P. Singh, today we've come out with the Indian government saying that it's time to have a proper probe by the international. The international community is also saying this. A global study is an important first step. Is it a time to unravel the China COVID truth? A lot of people say there could have been biowarfare. A lot of people say this was it was a man-made leak that needs to be probed, but China continues to be reluctant.
Well, over almost 1 lakh people have died because of this worldwide, more than that. Obviously, more investigation is done, and WHO has also categorically said that yes, it needs to be further investigated. And then we'll appreciate China should cooperate in the investigation for the welfare of the world and for them also. Because the world need to know whether it was through animal transmitted to human being, whether it's something which happened in the laboratory in Wuhan, and then just need to be further explored. And there are serious doubts about the complete theory of the animal transmission. So, and then there are a lot of doubts about that it came through the some accident in the laboratory, or something happened in the Wuhan laboratory. And there are many more scientists who from China also, who escaped China also now, they are also claiming the same. So there is no harm. It's good for China also and good for the world to know where did the complete virus originated, which has crippled the world economy, which has crippled the world overall. The health infrastructure also, it has damaged the world like, it has not happened in the last 100 years. So world need to know that, and every world citizen need to know that. And today, American president said so that in 90 days they are probably has asked the intelligence agencies here to further investigate and get the report. We'll appreciate China should cooperate in this rather than hiding anything.
Absolutely, R.P. Singh. Let me also get over to Professor Madhav Nalapat and also Professor Shrikant Kondipalli, who's joining us. Professor Kondipalli, I want to come to you first as someone who understands Chinese studies and you're an authority in that. The facts are very shocking, and I was reading through Mr. Gurumurthy's very fascinating, intriguing, but very shocking 2 articles today that pointed and tried to make understanding of what Wade had said earlier. When he spoke about the Bat Lady, when S. Gurumurthy points out who subcontracted the coronavirus grant, when he speaks about a certain scientist, including Dr. Shi Zhengli, focusing on enhancing the ability of the bat viruses to attack humans at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, this is no longer just figments of imagination, but the truth that it could possibly be a lab leak.
Thank you for the invite. I think for a long period of time, there has been an international collaboration with the Wuhan Institute of Virology in tweaking the genome structure and making it applicable to human beings. So since 2015, there has been an intensive research into this aspect of converting some of these coronavirus and making them with spikes that could attach to human beings, human cells. So there has been an effort since 2015 at Wuhan Institute of Virology. Coincidentally, as you mentioned, Dr. Shri Changli, the Batwoman, as she was to be called, she received one of the highest awards from the French government for her PhD in virology from France. There is also the Dr. Shri's association with the American Microbiology Association, Academy of Microbiology. Thirdly, there is also collaboration with Peter Desjardins, Ralph Baric, Christian Anderson, and other famous virologists. So while the United States has shut down its own military-related virology aspects, they thought that the Wuhan Institute of Virology is a best bet, and the research projects have continued in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The French have helped the Chinese in setting up the high security BSL-4 lab, while actually the virus has come about in the BSL-2 low security. So an American delegation which visited the Wuhan Institute of Virology 2 years ago, they found the security system pretty lax, and the virus could have shifted from the institute to the outside world, into the wet market or into the other outlets. So there is a lax security system in the BSL-2 lab of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Moreover, what is important is that while the patients have been coming up in China, in Wuhan, in October, November of 2019, it's only on December 31st that they conform to the genome changes. And on December 31st itself, the Huanan wet market has been cleaned up, so much so that the evidence today is not existing at that level. So the 2 WHO delegations which visited China, and some members were having access to Wuhan, but not to the Wuhan Institute of Virology or to the blood samples and the drainage samples, where you can actually get much of this data, credible data. That has not been shared with the WHO delegation, the 2 delegations that have visited last year and this year. Also, the Chinese lied by suggesting that there is no human-to-human transmission, while the patients are increasing in human-to-human transmission. The Chinese lied to the international community and to the WHO that there is no human-to-human transmission. So between October 2019 and January 23rd, 2020, when there was a lockdown of Wuhan city, over 5 million people have migrated from Wuhan to different destinations, including those 3 students from Wuhan to Kerala via Kolkata. By a train, they have gone to Kerala, possibly infecting scores of people. So, in other words, if the international community and the WHO knew of the human-to-human transmission, a lot of measures could have been undertaken at that time itself in clamping down on the spread of the pandemic. So there are a lot of problems in the official description, and also the WHO, which has not been able to give proper guidance in terms of the pandemic spread. In fact, the WHO has given advisories saying that this is not going to spread to the human beings because the Chinese withheld the information. So there are a lot of problems in the WHO itself, and so that is where the last May the World Health Assembly asked the WHO to investigate into this matter. However, we do not have a comprehensive, impartial, independent investigation so far.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Professor Kondapalli, as you speak, every sentence has been very carefully heard, and I completely agree with you. If in fact this was the only lab where certain tests could be done, if in fact the United States believed they could be done and they were possibly at one time supporting this particular lab, then why in the end, when these tests didn't go out right, was a proper investigation done? Why is the WHO so scared? What is happening with Peter Dranzak? A question which I will be asking and raising and making people understand. The person who led the WHO investigations, also a person who had some sort of an interest in the Wuhan virology laboratory. But now I want to also ask a question to James Kraska. James, we've heard Professor Kondapalli there, and as I welcome you on the show, James Kraska, I ask you, there is a Chinese 2015 paper suggesting use of man-made use of virus as a bioweapon. US officials obtained papers where Chinese scientists had been having discussions on the coronavirus and saying a new era of genetic weapons could be out, claiming the virus could be artificially manipulated. Could the possibility of a man-made virus now become extremely certain?
Thank you for the question. So you're absolutely right. First off, what I would say is that no source in China is a credible source, because China is not a free society. You cannot have this television debate in China that we have in the United States or that we have in India. Every person in China and Hong Kong is subject to the power of the Chinese Communist Party, including, by the way, foreign nationals such as the Canadians that were detained for no reason by Chinese authorities. So here's what we do know. It's beyond a doubt that the Chinese Communist Party actively engaged in a cover-up designed to obfuscate the data, to hide relevant public health information, suppress doctors in China and journalists in China who attempted to find out more or to warn the world. We know that the Chinese Communist Party deliberately and repeatedly disregarded their obligations under the 2005 international health regulations. Senior Chinese Communist Party leaders, including Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, knew a pandemic was ongoing weeks before it was announced and failed to notify other countries in compliance with the 2005 international health regulations. So if they had acted in a transparent and responsible manner, the Chinese Communist Party would have been able to support global health responses. In our countries, our health officials are in charge of countering the pandemic. In China, they have appointed a major general who's in charge of biological warfare for responding to their addressing the pandemic. Nothing about China and the pandemic has been transparent, as more countries have been questioning the Chinese Communist Party and the official accounting of the early stages of the pandemic, and it calls for international investigation. China has continued to destroy samples, hide data, not be forthcoming, and also to impose economic manipulation and trade coercion and other coercive measures to try to demand silence. They have also tried to shift the blame to other countries. And this is because the fragility of an authoritarian power that cannot admit mistakes. Unlike democracies such as our countries, it is within the nature of countries like North Korea, China, the Soviet Union, that they cannot fathom any sort of failure. And so there's always this type of cover-up or overreaction.
Yes, and I completely agree with you, James Kruska, as you speak there. I'm also going to quickly be coming across to Tenzin Sunde, as well as Professor Dr. Amitesh Anand, I beg your pardon. I want to take my next question to Professor Madhav Nalapat, and I want to take off from where James Kruska has been speaking about. James has given exactly the same picture, which is alarming, but at the same time very truthful, as he speaks in the same tone and tenor as Professor Kontepalli. So Professor Nalapat, I ask you, there was also a study that has been quoted in the Australian media, and yet again I look for knowledge and for understanding to Mr. S. Gurumurthy's article, where it says the Chinese army projected the next world war would be fought with bioweapons. For that purpose, it developed in 2015 coronavirus to destroy the enemy's health infrastructure. It added the US State Department obtained Chinese documents that disclosed the denial. And undeniably, the Wuhan virology laboratory is mixed up with heinous work. Can a bio-warfare angle be ruled out? My one question. And the second thing that Professor Kontepalli spoke about, Peter Daszak. Our viewers need to understand, it seems like a very heinous nexus when the bat lady, that is Dr. Shi Zhengli, is actually given and subcontracted grant by Peter Daszak. Who is Peter Daszak? He is a WHO panel member who investigated the entire coronavirus and said it seems to have come from bats and it's got nothing to do with anything else. He's also the person, when the virus broke out, scientists signed letters saying it could not be a lab leak, and he was also one of them. He's also someone who's been praising her and saying that she developed more than 100 bat viruses. Too many coincidences, Professor Nalapat?
Well, I'd like to say that I heard this amusing theory about Fort Detrick. And may I point out that if it was really this kind of deadly virus that the world has been experiencing for more than a year, well, there ought to have been a spread of this virus to other parts of the United States. I don't think my Hong Kong friend believes that Americans don't travel. In fact, they travel even more than Chinese do. And there ought to have been a spread to different countries. If there are more people who travel abroad than Chinese, it is Americans. But there was no such spread. So frankly, I don't buy this theory about Fort Detrick at all. I think it's very much a red herring. Secondly, I want to take off from what has been said by Gurumurthy and others regarding the involvement of the military. Look, I think in India, for the last 50 years at least, we have been aware of a very close collaboration between the PLA and GHQ Rawalpindi. And we are well aware GHQ Rawalpindi does not like to fight a conventional war. GHQ Rawalpindi believes in covert war, terrorism, including, I'm sure they would be delighted, in bioterrorism. And I'm sure that if some other country developed a bioweapon, they would use their network in certain countries to ensure that it gets spread. So I'd like to say that the reality of this complete spread of the virus, as correctly said, because the Chinese authorities failed to warn the world when they themselves knew it was deadly. And may I say, as far as WHO is concerned, our country has relied on the WHO for the last 1 year, and we have seen the results in this second variant. Now, just when India is recovering its economy, when, for example, the UK is recovering, and UK, as you know, the Chinese are not very happy about it precisely because of Hong Kong, where one of our discussions come from, and Taiwan. We all know that the Chinese, what they want to do to Taiwan, where all these countries suddenly see a second wave. Now, the reality is that if you say preparation was not there, well, preparation was there if the virus was natural. If it was a bioweapon, if there is a possibility of it being a bioweapon, especially a bioweapon that is in the hands not only of the PLA, but GHQ Rawalpindi, and the two of them are basically dealing in asymmetric methods of warfare, then I think Indian authorities also would have looked upon it in a very different way. So I'd like to point out the hard facts of the virus, the hard facts even of the second wave, give rise to a very legitimate hypothesis that this was artificially engineered. It didn't come from bats. If it came from bats, what's the intermediate vector? There were civet cats in the previous SARS outbreak.
Yes.
There was camel in the MERS outbreak. Where is the vector here? Even the Chinese have not come up with even a semi-credible vector. So I'd like to say very frankly, the lab leak theory is most likely. And what the WHO did, well, it appointed an individual who, if the theory were correct, would be guilty of criminal misconduct, Peter Daszak, to, in a sense, guide and lead their own investigation. Now, frankly, if I have committed a murder and the Delhi police entrust me with solving the murder, I'm very unlikely to solve that particular murder except by pointing my finger at somebody else. Because if I solve it, I'm the one who goes to jail. So frankly, I don't know what the WHO was thinking when it appointed Peter Daszak. The WHO has no credibility. The Wuhan lab has completely scrubbed. It's a new lab from what it was 13 months ago. And I mean, the wet market has been completely transformed. It's nothing at all what it was, unless we see the blood samples of that period, unless we can understand the conditions of that period. And may I say, even the great Dr. Tedros in 2018 admitted in a report that the Wuhan lab has extremely lax oversight standards. This was not said by some American or some Indian. This was said by Dr. Tedros himself, who is frankly very, very, if I may say so, not at all unsympathetic to the Chinese point of view.
Professor Nalapat, you most certainly must say so. In fact, everyone should say so, and the truth should come out, because like you speak, this is exactly what everybody is saying on the show, and this indignation, this truth needs to come out, because this is a pandemic that is more and more looking like it's man-made. Dr. Amitesh Anand, you're an infectious disease expert joining us from University of California. And may I just tell my viewers, it's a fantastic panel that we have today. People from Hong Kong, people from the capital, professors joining us, scientists joining us from the United States, from Hong Kong, and all of them speaking in one voice when they asked for an independent investigation in the China COVID truth. Dr. Anand, I ask you, like Professor Nalapat has been speaking about, Nicholas Wade claimed a fact sheet was issued by the US State Department. This was in 2021 when they gave out details about how several researchers at the Wuhan Institute of Virology became sick in autumn 2019 before the first identified case of the outbreak. With symptoms such as these, this is a Chinese lab leak, is it not? The second thing, when there's a Republican members of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence report, it also says that as early as 2016, researchers were conducting experiments involving the bat coronavirus identified by the WIV. Can the Chinese origin of the virus at any point now, ever and at all be dismissed?
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the great question. Let me bring in the scientific perspective to this debate. So I have been doing this gain of function research for the last 5 years. I've been dealing with bacterial systems. So let me try to explain a bit what we do over here, and then I'll move into the possibility with the viral manipulation in laboratory. So we try to evolve a microbe in a laboratory system. So basically what we try to do is we try to simulate what happens in nature. And this way we try to see if a microbe can evolve or adapt to live in any given selection pressure, under any given selection pressure. So it is possible to evolve microbes in laboratory system. So if now we go to the debate of possibility versus reality, whether it is possible and whether it is the reality. So the possibility aspect is very strong. Yes, both natural evolution and laboratory evolution is possible, which means it may have come from wet market. There is equal possibility that it may have leaked from laboratory, and there were gain of function research going on for this virus to be evolved in a more infectious or deadly manner. Now, this is possibility. Coming back to reality, we do not have conclusive evidence for either of the hypotheses. Now, the problem is that for the first hypothesis, where we deal with the wet market theory, we have been doing research for more than 1.5 years. There has been international efforts going on to understand if it is a natural evolution and what has happened. Like one of the fellow panelists mentioned, that what is the intermediate host. Unfortunately, after that 1.5 years, we are still nowhere. We do not have a conclusive evidence to say that there is a natural evolution which has happened in this case. Coming back to laboratory evolution or lab leak theory, unfortunately, most of the rejection to this theory has been emotional. There has not been scientific rejection to this theory. In fact, there has not been enough scientific study in this direction. That itself speaks volumes about what is happening and what will be possible. So again, I'll wrap up my answer saying just that both the hypotheses are still live. We have both the hypotheses are equally valid, and unfortunately, we have not put much effort in looking into the lab leak theory, which should be. And now that the case load in US is fortunately very low, US administration is able to focus more on the origin aspect of the virus. And I hope within a shorter span, we'll have a more credible answer to this debate.
Yes, that's what we are looking at. And I also want to, as I'm going to go across to Dr. Tenzin Sunde, I also am going to ask him a question, ladies and gentlemen, which I ask our viewers. This is no longer about economic one-upmanship. This is about finding answers. This is about finding what has uprooted your life and my life. This is about trying to understand and really try and understand what the origins of the COVID were and the China connection. There has to be a fair investigation. Global countries and pressure demands it. Tenzin Sunde, 14 countries expressed concern over the WHO-China joint report. In March, a group of 14 countries came forward. The European delegation to the UN has said there's an urgent need for an extensive probe. 100 countries called for investigations last year. Australia has said a global independent committee set up, distinct from WHO, needs to be there. Isn't it finally time for the global community to tell China we need an investigation in this?
Yes. Firstly, China has been changing the narrative right from the beginning. They said it came from wet market, and later they started to blame that it could have come from the United States, or they even named India as a source of that. China has been lying. But the sad fact is, internationally, the international community has failed belling the cat, and that is China. China, in the beginning, firstly, they tampered with evidence. They hid facts and figures. They jailed whistleblowers. The doctor who first talked about it was punished. And this is how China lied. And this is how it ended up becoming an epidemic, something that could have been an epidemic in a city, in Wuhan. It had now become pandemic around the world. Millions of people are lost their lives, and it has now caused a catastrophe. Now what is needed is, internationally, there should be an internationally coordinated investigation into this and make China accountable to the lies they have done this. And Mr. Andrew Leung, he's on the panel today, I want to tell you, Mr. Andrew Leung, you must tell Xi Jinping that China must accept the responsibility and accountability for having caused the pandemic and the death and the destruction the entire community, international community is suffering. Now, China must cooperate. China must cooperate with the international community's investigation and find out the truth. Without knowing the origination of the virus, there is no end to this pain and the suffering that the international community is undergoing. I am a Tibetan refugee. I'm speaking from Dharamshala. We know China. China has invaded and occupied our country for 70 years. And China has occupied not only Tibet, East Turkestan, Southern Mongolia, Manchuria. Now China is threatening to invade Taiwan. And all this time, international community kept silent. Why? Because they felt it is their problem. It is not our problem. Today, because of the pandemic, internationally, everybody is affected. There is not a single human being in the world who is not affected by a pandemic. And it is called, everything has caused from China, and China must take accountability to this, and international community must make China pay for this.
Yes.
Can I respond to that, please?
I asked, and Andrew Leung, I ask you, from where Tenzin Sunde has left off. Yes, please do respond. Please do.
Well, briefly, I would just say that China share the findings of the virus as early as I think it's the 3rd of January 2020. That's over a year and a half ago. And in the international journal called Lancet. And then won the praise of the international experts around there and share around the world. And that's why some countries are able to contain the virus. Some countries did not.
Not true, Andrew Leung, not true.
Seriously.
Not true. It is China who has been lying, and you did not give information on time. Even when Taiwan said it is transmittable from human to human, China kept on saying no and no. And that's how it became a pandemic.
Let's look at it. Well, first of all, it's a fact that these findings were reported to Lancet as early as January 2020. And secondly, at the beginning, let's not forget, it's a completely new disease. Like any other new disease, when it first happened, nobody had a very good idea whether it could be spread from human to human or animal to human. And even the WHO scientists were saying this at the beginning. So that's the beginning. But then soon, more data came up, and China shared this data internationally.
Not true. Andrew Leung, now you're also lying on this platform. It is China who has been lying. You did not give information on time. You knew. And the doctors who told about it, these doctors were jailed. And Dr. Wen Liang, he died in jail. And so this is how you cause the pandemic in the world. And you must accept this mistake. Unless China accepts this mistake, you will never be able to correct this. International community must talk about this.
Well, I think that I've said my say. That's the timeline. In the beginning, as I said, nobody had a very good idea. And of course, that China also learned something from it, because the low-level people, they were trying to not to afraid of reporting something which is turned out to be wrong. So I think that China has now set up a new ministry on pandemic as a result of this experience. But this does not mean that China was lied about it. And as I said, China shared the findings as early as January, over a year and a half ago. So what other countries which have failed to take these findings seriously and ending up with a lot of deaths and fatalities should have themselves to blame. And for China locked down Wuhan very quickly, 10 million people, the whole city. So I think that you've got to look at the facts and not rely on politics or political demonization.
Yeah, see. So use China stop internal travel. But you, without telling international community that it is spreading, you allowed without the knowledge of this, you allowed people to travel everywhere. And that's how the pandemic happened. China must take accountability on this, own accountability on this.
Well, but at that time, they didn't know that it would spread from person to person at the very beginning. So, I mean, even the WHO was no wiser on that. So I think that, as I said, the China shared this finding very early. Don't forget, January 2020. Let's face it. How many countries are taking these findings seriously?
Okay, I heard Andrew Leung and I've heard Tenzin Sunde, and I think the same point is being reiterated. It's a point that is being questioned, Andrew, by several people, Andrew Leung. So it's not only Tenzin, but I think Professor Kondapalli, Professor Nalapat, James Kraska, Dr. Amitesh Anand, Ray Locke, all of them had similar questions. And I also now want to go to Sardar R.P. Singh. R.P. Singh, what is India's demand now as global pressure grows on China to have a fair, independent investigation? What is India's demand going to be?
Well, we will need a robust study to be done, and then all the data which is there should be analyzed again. And I'm sorry, I differ with the Chinese friend here who says that they shared the data and information immediately. It was probably 3 months later than when it started. Had it been shared at the earliest stage, probably in October, month of October, November, things would have been different worldwide. So China did hide the thing and then hide the search and the details of the virus, and the spread of the virus in Wuhan also. And yes, they blocked the Wuhan city and they blocked the other cities in China, but they allowed the foreign travel to happen from China and to China also in that period. And we all know that's the reason. But that's point aside, but still we need to understand where did it started from. The world needs to know where it started from, whether it is a natural virus, whether it's created from animals, or whether it was created in lab, or whether it's a bio weapon. So all this, and there are a lot of other research and documents which prove otherwise, that there is some tie with Pakistan also on whole of this bioweapon series. And Pakistan is part of that bioweapon series of China. So world needs to know what's happening. And especially with the second wave which is happening now, this has happened, as Professor Dalapat was saying, it has happened in selective nations. Like if I talk about the common parlance, it happened in India, but it's not happening in Pakistan. It's not happening in Bangladesh. So it raises a lot of suspicion. It raises a lot of question that is it being targeted, or countries are being targeted for reason. So all this need to be reach to a certain conclusion. We need to understand and reach to a certain conclusion, because it's not going to end of this. And then as one of the
yes, absolutely.
So as one of the sorry, I'll finish. As one of the panelists was saying, it has hampered the world economy, world processes and other political systems also. So we need to investigate, and then we are in support of countries who are, and WHO should, and then whatever report WHO has filed should be investigated further.
Yes, Professor Kondapalli, you wanted to make a point, and before you do, I also want to ask you, the whistleblower whom Tenzin was talking about, Dr. Li Wenliang, was forced by the Chinese police to sign a letter saying he spread untrue speech for warning colleagues about coronavirus that eventually killed him. Andrew Leung seems to say China did its best. How do you look at it?
Are you speaking to me? Hello?
Actually, there is an emergency law of the People's Republic of China in 2017. According to that, any virus that erupts in China has to be fed into the computers, and Beijing has to be informed. So when in October, November, 2019 when this virus has erupted. This has already been communicated to Beijing by the local Wuhan doctors. But central government has kept quiet because they thought that this will have an impact on the production and on the economy. So President Xi Jinping did not speak about the virus on the New Year Eve speech on December 31st, 2019. The Chinese confirmed the human-to-human transmission only on January 7th. And on January 8th, there was a lady, 60-year-old lady in Bangkok, who came from Wuhan. She became the first person abroad with the virus. And it is after January 23rd that China locked down the Wuhan city, and Wuhan mayor made a statement to the TV that 5 million people have gone from Wuhan to other destinations. And according to an American estimate, 452,000 people have gone to the United States, and thousands of people have gone to Lombardy in Italy, which is where much of the infections have been shown, and also in Spain, Qom in Iran, and in Mecca, because there were also some of the Islamic people were also going to Mecca. So this is the spread of the virus before January 23rd, 2020. So it is not true that the Chinese government has put restrictions on the outbreak of the virus. The key problem is that there should be some investigation into this process, and there must be, the facts should be, the truth should be found out, because the WHO delegations were not given full access of the blood samples or the drainage samples, which are crucial in identifying the spread of the virus.
Yes, yes, that's true. And that needs to be there. I want to ask James Kraska, who is the Stockton Professor of International Maritime Law, about international law. When everybody is asking for an investigation here, Mr. James Kraska, international law demands accountability. Where there are UN laws like the Responsibility of States for Internationally Wrongful Acts 2001 that was adopted by the Commission in 2001, it states that countries violating the law have an obligation to make full reparation for the injury caused by the International Wrongful Act. Shouldn't China be investigated? There's a violation of the 2005 possible international health regulations, which under Article 6 states that to notify the WHO about a public health emergency within 24 hours, which was not done. Shouldn't China be investigated? Who also investigated into MERS? Why is China still not facing an investigation?
So, in my view, I think that China already is responsible for violating the 2005 international health regulations, regardless of the actual origin of the virus, because of all of the things that have been discussed, the failure of transparency, which is not optional under IHR. It's a legal duty to produce that. And the result, of course, is that there's now some 3.4 million people dead, more than 650,000 Americans that are dead, some 300,000 Indians that are dead, across the world, economic devastation. So there is responsibility already for the lack of transparency. May I say, with regard to the origin, I'm not a microbiologist, but I understand as a lawyer how to evaluate evidence. And there is not direct evidence, because linking this virus to the Wuhan BSL-4 laboratory, because China has either destroyed or hidden the evidence. There's not direct evidence. What there is in ample supply is circumstantial evidence. And in fact, most people that are criminals that go to jail based on circumstantial evidence. If a defendant is in the same house as somebody that then is murdered at the same time, and there's a murder weapon in the home, nobody saw that person actually murder the victim. but circumstantially, juries and judges all over the world are not are able to make that sort of connection. And so, from what I have seen,
Yes.
the circumstantial evidence is quite vast, and we haven't talked about all of it that's available in the media even. The circumstantial evidence of it arising naturally has not been reported at all or very extensively. So my view is, with respect to the scientists should not be making the decision. The decision ought to be made by leaders looking at the evidence.
Yes, I agree. And I end with the lawyers. We've had scientists, we've had professors, viewers, we've had people speaking on the show. And the one thing is, the law is supreme. The international law needs to be followed. China needs to be held accountable if there is a wrongdoing. An investigation, like RP Singh said, is a must. India now joining the global people and the global countries that are asking for that investigation, and that is what we are looking at. An independent scientific investigation, but also an investigation like James Kraska said. I thank all of you for being a part of for an understanding debate on the real truth between the China COVID origin. Thank you for being with us today.